Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today I am joined by Scott Ritter. Very happy to connect with Scott again. He found time for me. Before we start, I want to apologize for my absolutely disastrous lighting because I'm in Sri Lanka, as some of you know, so it's out and in, off and on. Anyway, you can see me or you can hear me, you know this is me. Scott Ritter is back. Welcome back, Scott.
Thank you very much for having me.
I have a first question for you. Actually, we have a lot to talk about Poland today, but I will start with this. What Morawiecki, you know who is Morawiecki, Polish Prime Minister. I call him, many people call him Pinocchio because he's not truthful, very, very not truthful. So Morawiecki recently was visiting United States. And he was in Alabama, talking about very proudly about the agreement, about new purchases from US, the tanks and more tanks and tanks. But he mentioned something that I want to quote. The light came on. Exactly what he said. He said, "We are also striving for the Abrams ammunition course, depleted uranium course, and ultra-modern ammunition to be established in Poland." He emphasized that currently the biggest problem at the front is the lack of the ammunition. So I would like to ask you first, this depleted uranium that he's talking about to be used in the production, right, of ammunition in Poland, as I understand, how dangerous this is, the production process, and then after this is being used, what are the effects on people besides, I mean, if they survive, whatever was that attack, right, by it, but what is the final side effect after this being used on people?
I mean, first of all, the manufacture depleted uranium is a byproduct of the enrichment of uranium. You take natural uranium and it gets turned into a gas, and then the gas is put through centrifuges. That's the most popular way, and the idea is through the centrifuge process, you want to separate the U-235 isotope from the rest of the uranium, and the U-235 is the stuff that's used for the nuclear weapons. The depleted uranium, the reason why it's called depleted is because it's had all of the highly radioactive elements removed from it. The depleted uranium is very dense. It's a dense metal. So when it comes out as a gas, it's reprocessed and becomes a metal. And in and of itself, it's not overly radioactive. There is an element of beta radiation, low-level beta radiation, that you wouldn't want to hold it or keep it next to your body for a long period of time. But generally speaking, you have more radiation in background radiation and things of that nature in nature. So the depleted uranium of itself is not a radioactive risk, especially short term. The problem with it is that when you use it as a weapon, it's what they're going to use it for in the tank munition is what's called a penetrator. So it's going to be like a rod, like a spearhead, and then that spearhead is going to be wrapped in propellant, and then they'll put what they call a sabot, which is like an aluminum shell over it, and that gets fired out of the tank round. And then the sabot separates and the penetrator hits armor. Because it's very dense, it's very good at penetrating armor. But as it penetrates, it's degrading, it's evaporating, so to speak, so it becomes particles and dust. And that's the problem, because two things. One, the guys in the tank are probably going to be dead anyway, so they don't care. But the people who come or get around the tank will be breathing in these particles. It gets on your clothing. It follows you wherever you go. So you'll be contaminated by this. If you breathe it in, it's heavy metal and it has the beta radiation. So this depleted uranium, if it gets in your lungs, is going to be sitting there, and it's pretty much a guarantee that you're going to get cancer. That way, it gets into your system, gets into your blood, you're going to get leukemia. It's in the soil, and it never goes away. It's there forever. It's poison. And so kids who come into the area later and are playing soccer in the dirt, and the dirt kicks up as kids are wont to do, and they get covered in it, the kids are going to get sick and die. Mothers who are eating the food and come into contamination, they're going to get sick and die, but they're also going to give birth to deformed children. Children will either be dead, deformed, or doomed to die. So it's a weapon that has an inherent attraction from a purely military standpoint, meaning it's a very good and inexpensive way to kill enemy tanks. But when you look at what it does in the long term, it's a poison and it doesn't go away. And in war, you end up firing a lot of these rounds. It's not like this is a one of, oops, we have a limited thing. They're going to be pumping tons of this material into the soil, into the atmosphere. So wherever these battlefields are occurring, they will become permanently contaminated areas that condemn the citizens, the civilians who live on them down the road to horrific suffering, which is why Russia says we don't want these on Ukrainian soil. We don't want this this poison on Ukrainian soil. The Russians used to use depleted. Look, it's a good weapon. It's a killer. The Russians used to make anti-tank rounds using depleted uranium, but after the lessons of the first Gulf War, where we poisoned the Basra area, after the lessons of Kosovo, where NATO fired 30,000 of these rounds, and now you have Kosovar men with high levels of leukemia and women suffering. The Russians in 2000 said, we're pulling these shells. We're not doing this anymore. We're going to make it different. They can use tungsten. Tungsten's expensive. One of the good things about depleted uranium is that it's relatively cheap. Tungsten's more expensive, but the Russians said we'd rather spend more money up front building an expensive round than having to deal with the consequences of depleted uranium down the road. So the Russians, as much as you can make it take a moral stance during war, because all war is organized murder. But the Russians have taken a moral stance when it comes to a principled stance on depleted uranium. The West has not. We continue to use depleted uranium, not just in terms of the main tank rounds for the Abrams tank, which is what the Poles are looking for, or the Challenger tank is also using them. But we use them on the 25 millimeter chain gun that's on the M2 Bradley. So we've provided the Ukrainians with 90 Bradley fighting vehicles, and the ammunition for the M2 incorporates depleted uranium rounds. So the United States has not taken that moral stance yet. We continue to lie and deliberately suppress. We oppose the World Health Organization from doing and releasing the studies from Iraq because we don't want the truth told about Iraq. We continue to say that this that there's no evidence that depleted uranium causes these problems. And it's, I guess people have grown accustomed to Americans not caring about Iraqis. After all, Madeleine Albright said that 500,000 children starving to death and dying of disease was a price she was willing to pay to hold Saddam account. So we're willing to write off 500,000 Iraqi children like that. That didn't cause the American people to rise up in the streets. We invaded that country. We've killed tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands more Iraqis. We've condemned millions to deprivation, suffering, but we don't care about them. But we claim to care about the troops. We claim to support. I mean, I go around the United States and I see the yellow stickers on everybody's car, support the troops. But we don't, because if we did support the troops, we wouldn't support the use of depleted uranium because the depleted uranium contaminates our own troops. It's the troops we claim to support that are having high cancer rates, whose wives are giving birth to deformed children. So we lie straight up about everything, including our willingness to support the troops. And anybody who says that we need depleted uranium, we don't. Look, we're the richest nation in the world for a moment. Who knows what's going to happen with the dollar? But right now, we're the richest nation. We spend, almost $900 billion a year on defense. Trust me, America, we can afford to get rid of depleted uranium and replace it with tungsten penetrators. It may cost more, but it's the right thing to do. And we should never allow depleted uranium to be sent to foreign lands like Ukraine. And the Poles are dumber than dirt for saying we want those weapons.
The Polish-speaking government, I emphasize again, Scott. So as I understand, they are actually using some of it in this conflict in Ukraine right now, right? Are they?
They plan on it. The Challenger 2 tanks, my understanding is they have not yet entered into combat, but the Challenger 2 tank, its system incorporates the depleted uranium rounds, and so if the Challenger 2 tank enters into Ukraine and is employed in combat, it will be using depleted uranium rounds. The Polish government wants to acquire the M1 tank. And so the M1 tank will have also depleted uranium rounds. Yeah.
All right. Why I've asked you this, I don't know if you're aware, probably you are. We had been going on in Poland through very challenging situation with Polish farmers. And that is because of the Ukrainian grain. They absolutely flooded Poland with Ukrainian grain, which they were selling for half of the price of Polish grain. That grain was occupying the storages. It's absolute mess. And, farmers are protesting. There's a lot of corruption in that as well, but that's another topic. Why I'm actually talking about this with you, because I was wondering, as there are talks and there are many videos that people show the level of poisoning in that grain that's coming from Ukraine. So when the conflict like this is taking place, and you've mentioned this with that depleted uranium, what could be in the soil and the earth and soil and the air, but now with what's taking place, the level of poison and toxicity, it's incredibly high, isn't it?
Look, Ukraine has some of the best soil in the world, the deep, dark, rich soil of Ukraine, and so it's it's been called the breadbasket of Europe and the world for some time now. But people need to understand that Ukraine inherited from the Soviet Union industries that were not ecologically sound, ecologically friendly. Now, Russia has cleaned up its act. Russia inherited these bad industries, but Russia has enacted laws that are designed to be environmentally, not friendly. I mean, industry is never environmentally friendly, but at least sensitive to the pollution and things of that nature. Ukraine has not. It's because of the corruption. They just pump out whatever they pump out, whatever the risk. So they're dumping toxins, pollutants, the whole thing, and it's in the soil, and it contaminates. But it's not just that. The grain that you're getting in Poland, just like the grain era, has been stored for a very long time. It's very bad grain. It's much of it might be even rotten.
It is, Scott. They're actually showing on the videos. Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Absolutely, it's rotten. They're actually showing the people in Poland. They show how rotten it is. Yeah.
Because the Ukrainians don't do what they're supposed to do, because they're corrupt. You see, to live life right, there are certain things that have to happen. I mean, for instance, we know that drinking polluted water causes diseases. So as a society, we have decided to have water treatment plants so that the water that comes into the houses can be drunk without fear of disease, which is fine. But now imagine that you have to build a water treatment plant that actually does what you say it's going to do. And then once you do it, it has to be managed properly. It requires work. People have to show up to work, do the job. There have to be inspectors that come in and make sure that they're doing the job. That way society polices itself to make sure that which is necessary for a well-functioning society is in place. In Ukraine, none of that happens because it's all corrupt. Everything about Ukraine is corrupt. Everything from the bottom to the very top. People take shortcuts. People don't do the job. People collect pay. They take the chemicals that are supposed to clean the water. So my point is, when you store grain, you have to rotate the grain. You have to make sure that and that's work. So the grain goes into a storage facility. You have to mark the time and the place and all that. And then the grain itself has to be rotated because otherwise it sits there and begins to ferment, it begins to rot. And the Ukrainians don't do that. But then they tell the World Food Organization that we have X amount of grain waiting there. Now the world, and then they sell it. And see, the Ukrainians don't care because the World Food Organization takes it and sends it to Africa, and nobody cares about black people. No one cares about black people or brown people. That's just straight up truth. So the Ukrainians are more than happy to dump their garbage on there. But now, because of food shortages in the world, that grain is being diverted to Europe. And because, again, what people don't understand is it's not about the food, it's about the perception. You see, food prices it's a commodity. And so it's traded on a commodity. So as long as you're moving product, the traders keep the prices down. But if everybody acknowledges that the product you're moving is crap, excuse my language, rotten stuff that you wouldn't feed a cow, the prices will go up. But they can't do that. So they have to keep the product moving. And they're going to do it in a way to keep global food prices down, but that's going to impact the local farmers. It's going to impact the Polish farmers, the Hungarian farmers, all the farmers of Europe that grow their own crops are now having their crops being supplanted by cheap, rotten, crappy Ukrainian grain, which is not only rotten, but as you said, when you test it, it comes out high on heavy metals and other toxins because the Ukrainians pollute everything because they don't do anything right. I don't mean to beat up on the individual Ukrainian, but I have to tell you, Ukrainian government has been nothing but corruption from the very beginning. It was born corrupt. It's only becoming more corrupt. And this war when you flood that much money, money without any strings attached, with no accounting, and you flood it into an already corrupt system, understand it corrupts everything. Yeah, so this whole grain thing, this whole grain deal, the Russians have seen through it from day one. They've been calling the Ukrainians out on it. They've been calling the world body out on it. But if Russia does the right thing, which is to shut it down, then it'll be accused of trying to create a food crisis, for the rest of the world and weaponizing food. The only people weaponizing food right now are the Ukrainians. And you guys are paying the price. You're getting really rotten crap grain that's not worthy of human consumption.
No, it's not. And Poland has incredible grain, and now they cannot sell it. And it's very, very difficult for those farmers right now, So I want to ask you now, I don't know if you've heard Dmitry Medvedev words as a response to, again, Morawiecki, Polish Prime Minister. Morawiecki today will be like kind of our main topic because he speaks a lot, because he's the mouthpiece of the White House, and he creates a lot of controversy and a lot of frustration from different countries. So with Medvedev, for example, he responded to his words and he said that if the conflict in Ukraine will escalate into like official NATO-Russia war, and Poland is part of it, Poland will cease to exist, definitely, including the underdeveloped, I'm quoting, prime minister. So when Medvedev said that, I mean, he just said pretty much the truth. But I would like to ask your thoughts on this. Do you think that, Russia, I think, is not, there is literally at this point, there's no issue as far as attacking Poland. We know about it. But do you think there is any way that they can somehow approach this situation with Poland in a different way, or no?
Well, I think, what Medvedev is saying very crudely and bluntly is that if there's a direct war between NATO and Russia, it'll probably go nuclear, and then Poland will just disappear. Yeah, okay. That's what he said. He's not. I know people, talk about, Russian tanks through Warsaw. Russian tanks aren't going to Warsaw. Russia's not going to Warsaw. Russia's not going to Poland. Russia has no desire to go to Poland. It's just not. It's not what they want. the Poles who make that claim, they're just mirror imaging their desire to send Polish tanks into Ukraine. Now, if Poland goes into Ukraine, then every Polish soldier that goes into Ukraine will die. That's a guaranteed. But the Poles are under the impression that they are now the center of the universe. They're infected with the same disease that the Ukrainians are. That apparently God created Poland and then created the rest of the world.
No, the government, Scott, please, just that I'm telling you.
Okay, the government, the Polish-speaking government. But they're behaving in such an arrogant manner, and they have to understand that there's a reason why Poland was the battleground. Look at your geography. The last thing Poland should be encouraging is conflict between Russia and the rest of Europe, because it's the Poles who pay the price all the time. And Europe doesn't like Poland. I think that's the other thing that the Poles need to understand. They don't like Poland, especially when they have governments like the current government who are so arrogant about, what makes Poland special? What makes Poland special? Why would France care about Poland right now? And I'm not talking about the humanity, because what makes every nation special is its people. And I'm not saying that the Polish people don't deserve respect and humanity, but the Polish government is acting as if Poland has an inherent right to sit at the head of the table and dictate outcomes to Europe. And the point is, Poland doesn't have that right. Poland is not a superpower. Poland is not the center of gravity for Europe. And yet Poland believes now, because they have sold their soul to the devil, and the devil is America, that because America is now cozied up to Poland, that Poland is now the premier power in Europe, and they're not. And I would just say the same thing to the Polish people that I said to the Ukrainian people at the very beginning. America is not your friend. We don't like you. We don't like you. We're not going to die for you. What we're going to do is use you. We're going to use you in a way that furthers our hegemony, not Polish hegemony. Poland will never have hegemony. Poland exists right now in its current manifestation to please their American master. And the moment you stop pleasing your American master, we will throw you to the side like we throw everybody else to the side. And the only question the Poles have to ask themselves now is how many zeros you want after a digit that will mark the number of dead Polish people. Because if you continue to work with America in the direction you're heading, you will lose a lot of people. The potential for losing all your people is real. Nuclear conflict is on your doorstep. Because of the United States, Belarus will now have nuclear weapons. And those nuclear weapons will be aimed at you because of your hostile rhetoric towards Belarus. You're not a big power. You will never be a big power. All you are is a middle power, even a lesser middle power, because your economy is not that good. Okay, you are not an economic powerhouse. You don't challenge Germany in any way, shape, or form. You don't challenge France. You don't challenge Italy. You don't challenge any nation in Europe. Your mouth is bigger than your ability to consume the food that you're piling on the plate. You can't do what your government's asking you to do. And stop believing that somehow the Baltic states are people that are looking out for your interests as well. Understand that the Baltic states are just miniature Polands, meaning little nations that think they're bigger than they are because they have other European powers on their soil propping them up. The Baltic states would be eliminated in 1 week in a war with Russia. 1 week, gone, wiped off the planet. They're not there to help you. They're there to hinder you. Poland is best served by being a friend to all. I'm not saying Poland should turn its back on the West, of course not. But Poland should not be in a position of allowing itself to be used as a foil against Russia. And that's what's happening. And somehow your leadership is reading history and looking back and talking about grand Polish alliances and grand Polish this, and letting Zelensky come in and have conversations about making the border disappear and the confederation. It's a death trap. It is a literal death trap for Poland. Poland needs to understand that there's a reason why at the end of the Second World War, a decision was made to make borders final. Because once you get in the game of erasing borders, you then create notions of nationalistic fantasy where Poland can become greater than it currently is. Poland is great as it is. It doesn't need any more territory. It doesn't need anything but to live in peace and harmony with all of its neighbors. But that's not the direction Poland's heading right now. They actually believe, there's people that actually think that Western Ukraine is Poland and is going to be Poland. It will never be Poland.
That's what this government is doing, Scott. How I wish there are people who absolutely agree with what you're saying in Poland. And I can tell you this for sure. I know there are. But I wish there would be more people who have more understanding of what's really taking place, because there are still some that are not aware of this, what you just said. But the government is absolutely doing very, very dangerous game right now. That's what they are doing. And I want to ask you, what do you think would be the conflict right now between Ukraine and Russia if Medvedev would be the president? I was just thinking about it actually today. If he, instead of Putin, would be the president now, how that conflict would look like with Ukraine?
I don't think too much differently, and I'll tell you why. Because Medvedev has a role to play right now. He's not the head of state. He's not the commander-in-chief. Putin is. Medvedev's job right now is to not stir up trouble, but is to say things that get people to think, to get people to worry, to put a marker on the table. But Putin's job, basically Medvedev's job, is to growl and bark. He's the attack dog that the responsible owner has on the leash. And when somebody comes too close, you let the leash off a little bit, and the attack dog does that. But Medvedev knows that's the role he's playing. If Medvedev ever became